Oh shit. All right. Everybody see me? Can you see me? Whoever's checking it out. Hope so. If not, y'all might just be seeing the top of my head. Okay. So what's going on, people? This is your boy Eric from AFNB Pictures, and welcome to episode 4 of Let's Talk. So, as usual, I put up a poll. Discussing different topics to talk about. The first one was Marvel versus DC. Which one is better? Obviously, that got a 0. Nobody really cared about that one. I guess that goes to show that this Marvel DC thing is fizzling out, which I'm kind of hoping it is. The second one was modern boxing versus old school boxing. I think that got like a 10. But the overall winner was 70s horror versus 90s horror. So, since that was the winner, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Hold on a minute. Switch. Sorry, I've been trying to figure out ways to do this on my laptop. I know I'm probably going to need, I'm just going to need a new laptop because my webcam is terrible on this thing. It is absolutely garbage. So, you know me, I'm cheap though. I don't like spending money, but I know I'm going to have to. So, that's the plan for the near future. Anyway, 70s horror versus 90s horror. I picked those two out of the 80s, the 2000s. You got your 80s, your 2000s, hell, you even got your 60s. But I feel that 70s and 90s horror, in my opinion, are the two best generations for, the horror genre. Mainly the 70s. I mean, the 70s really kick-started that whole, I call it the mindfuck era, because you had a lot of movies. You had, your Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This was the Argento era. This was the era where Europe was taking over. They were letting you know, hey, we can do what you do, and we can do it more fucked up. And they proved that from time to time, with films like Suspiria, Deep Red ones. And these are all Argento films. Fulci had a few. I would say probably from the early 70s, and it kind of leaked into the early 80s. So I would say probably 72 to 81 was when you had that mindfuck period of horror movies where it's just stuff that you saw that it almost felt so real. It just looked so real. And there's a reason why a lot of those films can still hold up to this day. Because now we living in, I call it, this is the jump scare era that we're living in, because everything is just relying on jump scares. And you got your films like The Conjuring, Boogeyman, movies like that just proves that it's so easy to just make somebody jump out of their seat. But in my opinion, those aren't films that I'm going to remember. I know people are Conjuring fans. I get it. I like the first Conjuring. I wasn't crazy about the sequels. I really wasn't crazy that much about the Annabelle spinoffs. But what I'm getting at is they're not memorable films. This is my personal opinion, and this is just what I'm going by, what I've seen. They're not very memorable to me. 70s and 90s era, those were the memorable years of really scary, just frightening fucking horror movies, man. I mean, the 70s killed it. I'll never forget the first time that I ever watched The Exorcist. First time I ever watched that, I was 12 years old. And whereas it didn't scare me the first time I watched it, it freaked me out. But it didn't really scare me because I couldn't really comprehend what it was entirely about. I hadn't really been that much into religion and, supernatural shit like that, because at that time I wasn't really that knowledgeable. I wasn't going to church often, so. But I remember my mom telling me the first time that she went to see it. She drove to Cleveland from Youngstown, Ohio to see this movie when it first dropped. And even she said the experience like you had, she told me, she said, son, you had to have been there in the theater to see that movie. And I kept saying, oh, it can't be that bad. Come on, it's not that bad, man. Look, it ain't that bad. It's creepy, but it ain't that bad. I didn't get scared of this movie, and this is gonna be with a lot of these '70s movies. It didn't really start scaring me until I got older and I started really understanding, getting more into, film concepts and subliminal imagery and messages within the storyline. So when I took my religion course in college and I started studying more on demons and demonology and different shit like that, that's when this movie really hit. And I looked at it a whole different way. I looked at The Exorcist an entirely different way. And to this day, this movie still scares the shit out of me. I think the last time I watched it, because I try to watch it every Halloween, last year I watched it. It was one of the only films I watched with the lights on, if that tells you anything. So, yeah, that one really took the cake. I will say the first one that I watched that immediately creeped me out was The Last House on the Left. Last House on the Left was the first '70s film that I watched, and once again, a lot of these are going to be recommendations. These were recommendations from my mom, my aunt, because they were big into horror film. They still are. My mom came up reading Stephen King novels, and she's the reason why I'm into a lot of this shit. So she had told me about it because I kept hearing the title. I was like, "What is it about? What is this about?" She's like, "Are you sure you want to watch this movie?" Like, it can't be that bad. I popped that DVD in, and keep in mind, I own this movie. I can count on one hand how many times I've actually watched this movie in its entirety. And it goes back to that just surrealism. These films felt so real. They didn't feel like movies. You ever watch a movie and it's like the acting is just too good? Like it's almost, it just feels too real because the performances are just too off the charts. It's like, yo, hey man, am I watching a snuff film? Like I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I'm about to cut this bitch off and call the police. Like, like this, that was one of the films to do that for me. Last House on the Left was one of the films to do that for me. Like that scene, and I can't say the word. It's YouTube. You can't say the word. So I'll say the SA scene is one of the most disturbing scenes that I've ever seen. Mainly because of the performances. And shout out to Wes Craven. R.I.P. to Wes Craven for that being his first film, man. It goes back to like one of my last Les talks, and he was on my list for like top 5 horror filmmakers, and that movie is one of the main reasons. You know what I'm saying? Like you watch that, and I'm sorry, that blows Nightmare on Elm Street out the park as far as scare factor. First Nightmare was scary, but Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, like '70s Craven was a different monster. And a lot of the '70s versions of these filmmakers, they were different monsters because at the time, you had a lot of hungry, young filmmakers that wanted to show you some shit that you will never forget. Another example, like our early '70s, and it's not necessarily a horror film, but depending on how you look at it, it is. Steven Spielberg, one of his first movies ever, was called Duel. I'm not sure exactly what year it came out. Matter of fact, let me look that up right now. I'm pretty sure it was I think it was '72 because I know he did this before Jaws. Hold on a minute. Thank you, Google, because I cannot spell tonight. I really can't. 1971. If I'm not mistaken, this dude was still in film school while he was doing this. This is early Spielberg, bro. This movie, it took road rage to a whole other level. And the scariest thing about it, like you could tell this was his pre-Jaws era, where like you didn't see the monster, but you knew the monster was there. For those that watch Duel, you know what I'm talking about. You never see the face of that truck driver for the entire hour and a half. You don't know what he looks like. Certain points you don't even know if it's a real nigga driving the truck. I thought when I first watched him, like, it's got to be a ghost driving that truck. Ain't nobody in that truck. This is some supernatural shit. And you see the hand, and it's like, okay, it's a person, but god damn. And that ending, yo, when you thought it was over, nah, it wasn't over. Yeah, man. 70 Spielberg. 70 Spielberg was scary. That was a scary monster, man. He had Duel. He had Jaws. The first Jaws. Yeah, Jaws was another example. Just that 70s fear. Like, because a lot of these movies was shit that can happen. And a lot of them were based off of true events. Hills Have Eyes was based off of a true event. That was based off of some real shit that happened in Scotland. Look up Sawney Bean. Sawneybean. Sawney Bean. They were an inbred clan of cannibals. I think when they found them, there was about over 100 of them. It was a man, it was Sawney Bean, Black Agnes, and they all had kids. And their kids had kids. And their kids had kids. All of which were product of, keeping it in the family. And they were cannibals. And just like in The Hills Have Eyes, they would catch people, coming down the road, and they would clip them off. And they would drag them in the cave, and, all this shit. Just, when you watch that movie, Craven literally took that from this Scottish tale. Some people consider it a folk tale. A lot of people don't think it's true. I think that shit is true. That shit is real. There ain't nothing supernatural about that, man. History has proven there is nothing supernatural about families to keep it in the family and come up effed up like that. And cannibals ain't no fictional thing. That is some real shit. And cannibalism has always been a scary concept to me. Like, just the thought of eating another human being is terrifying to me as a whole. Y'all hear any noise in the background? I'm watching Audition. I need some noise in the background. I just can't sit in a silent room and talk. It's kind of weird. So yeah, you had yeah, man, those were some different monsters, man. Definitely some different monsters. Yeah, 70s, the 70s, it was like that. They was about that life. That's the best way I can put it. They were definitely about that life. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, man. Dude, that was the first movie. You know what was crazy? I don't think that movie really showed any kind of cannibalism. It gave you the insinuation that they might have been. They never showed anything. All they showed is just that these people was messed up. And they had furniture with human bones and shit. Once again, it's another movie that's based off of some real shit. Look up Ed Gein. That's all I have to say. You know, Google search Ed Gein and you know what I'm talking about. European horror got very popular around this time. Very popular around this time. Mainly Argento. I remember the first time, I'll never forget the first time I watched Suspiria. That was just a strange, how can I describe that? Suspiria was a strange, beautiful, gory, just wonderfully fucked up movie. It was wonderfully fucked up. And even the violence in it was just like, man, in a very strange way, it's really nice. It's a very nice film to look at. Very cringy at times, but a very nice film to look at, if that makes sense. And that was a lot of Argento's films. I mean, you can go back and watch Deep Red, Opera, Phenomena, which stars a very, very young Jennifer Connelly. His films were just very... It was beautifully violent. It was beautifully violent in a sick and twisted way. I know I'm sounding crazy talking like that, but this is why, like, this era was just so near and dear to me. because of stuff like that. Once again, it's just unforgettable imagery that you had, and unforgettable surrealism that you had in the 70s. You know, so it's hard. It's still hard to say which era is the best, and I haven't even got into the 90s, which I'm about to get into because now we getting into the era that I technically grew up in. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 85. I didn't really get to enjoy movies that much during the 80s. I think the earliest film I remember watching was The Little Mermaid. And the only reason I had to see The Little Mermaid is because I wasn't old enough to watch Batman, which, fun fact, they both came out the same fucking year, the same time. Batman and Little Mermaid came out. I wanted to see Batman. I wasn't old enough. First Batman movie I went to see was Batman Returns. I was pissed that I didn't get to see the first one in the theaters. And I'm still mad about that to this day. But that's cool because Batman Returns, that's the superior movie. That's the best Batman movie ever. I don't give a fuck what nobody say. Uh, but the first 90s horror movie that I remember seeing was an old movie with Julian Sands. And let me know if y'all remember this movie. You guys remember the Warlock series? The first horror movie I remember going to see was Warlock 2 Armageddon. Julian Sands. R.I.P. to Julian Sands, by the way. Now, that's a fucked up story in its own, and that's messed up how they found it, man. That was... I still can't believe it. I still don't feel that shit is real, but... Yeah, like look that up. Look up Julian Sands. Like, you know, like for those that don't know who he is, look up his biography and also look up Warlock and Warlock 2. Warlock 3, fuck that movie. That doesn't count. Nothing against Bruce Payne, but that was just a shitty sequel. But yeah, Warlock 2, that shit, man, that freaked me out. Like anything that deals with like witches and witchcraft and shit like that. But this movie creeped me out, man. I saw this at a very young age, and then once again, imagery is everything. This is why a lot of this is going to seem kind of biased, but this is where I'm coming from with a lot of this. Imagery is everything. Just like the 70s had imagery that was fucked up, the 90s had imagery that was just as fucked up. It was just as bad. Forgive me because I'm gonna start jumping back and forth from 70s to 90s, 70s to 90s. I might talk about a little early 80s too, because in my opinion, early 80s is tied with 70s. But yeah, 90s horror had a lot of that. You had your Warlock films, you had you had your one Jason movie in the 90s, Jason Goes to Hell, which is a very frowned upon film, and I understand why. It's near and dear to me because it's the first Jason movie that I ever saw in the theaters. Plus, it was the first pair of titties that I ever saw in the theaters. I mean, there's reasons why this movie, like I said, is near and dear to me. I can still remember it. I'm starting to feel like Mom from the Golden Girls. Like I can see it now. 1992, summertime. But yeah, it scared me. I'm sorry. That movie scared me, and it still does to this day. You know, you in 90s slashers, like 90s slashers, they had some 90s slashers that was bangers. 90s slasher films in the 90s, I feel were scarier than they were in the 80s. The 80s, the slasher movies was taking over, but they were comical. I don't know why, they were just comical to me. And they're comical to a lot of people. They're the movies that you go in the theater and you see people screaming, "Girl, don't go in there. Girl, don't go in there. Don't go in there. Bitch, you crazy. Why you run? White girl's tripping and falling over here." It's that type of shit. I still laugh at that shit. Like, man, come on, man. White girl gonna trip. But what is she tripping over? This bitch done tripped over some leaves. And for what? For nothing. If you don't get your ass up, there are movies that you talk through. Slasher movies in the 90s, some of those, man, I was too scared to talk through. Like, when I first saw Halloween Curse of Michael Myers, man, that kind of freaked me out, man. And that's another one started in the 70s from my favorite filmmaker, John Carpenter, 1978, man. Halloween. A lot of those sequels were misses. But I felt Curse of Michael Myers was not a miss. That one was not a miss. The Danielle Harris era, fuck that. I'm sorry, I didn't care for it. I know that's a lot of people's favorite, but it wasn't for me. It didn't do it for me. Curse of Michael Myers did it for me because they really got into some dark shit with Michael Myers. They really did. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the one where Loomis died because that was Donald Pleasance's last performance. Yeah, that was his last performance, and that was a sad day. That was a sad year because that was the year that he passed. Yeah, shit. R.I.P. to him. That man was a legend, fucking legend, man. I mean, he played my favorite Bond villain, Blofeld. Those who don't know, to see the poster, I'm a 007 fan. I'm going to be digressing a lot because I ramble and I have a slight case of ADHD. So if I start rambling from topic to topic, forgive me. Just try to keep up or stay with me. So you had your 90s slashers, the werewolf era. The 90s was the era of monster movies. You had your late 80s through the 90s. Monster and supernatural movies were really starting to kill it. They were killing it in the early 90s. And from the early to the mid 90s. I still remember Cinemax. Every Wednesday, they would have Horror Movie Wednesday. Where are my old school fans at, man? If y'all remember Cinemax Wednesday night, horror movies from 9 o'clock to about 11:30. Because 11:30, that's when Skinemax came on, and that's when, your daddy told you to go to sleep so he can... Don't judge. We all done did it. We all done did that shit. Some of you motherfuckers still... Come on, bruh. You remember Skinemax. But Cinemax had Horror Wednesday. Cinemax was a banger station, man. Because you had your Horror Movie Wednesday, you had Annie Monday. Oh my God, I miss Cinemax. I really miss Cinemax. I've seen some of the scariest movies on Cinemax. One of the scariest movies that I ever saw, and it's one of the corniest movies to this day. I want to say it came out around 94 or 95. It's a Cinemax movie called The Runestone. And it was based off of like an ancient folklore monster that had got resurrected by a runestone. It was going around killing people. And it was scary up until the end when you actually you see the monster himself. And when you see it, you're just like, oh, okay. This is what I was running from. All right, man, that's a little cheesy. But when you're a kid, and once again, it's the stuff that you don't see. This was where the 70s and 90s were very similar, because sometimes it wasn't what you saw, it's what you didn't see. Two prime examples of that are Alien and Jaws. You were more scared when you didn't see the monster. When they finally had the reveal, you kind of understood, oh, this is what they're running from. Yeah, I'd be running from that shit too. Yeah, I would definitely be running from that too. Runestone was it was almost an example of that. But it was one of those where like it didn't age well, but at the time it did its job. And that's what a lot of it really did. It really did do its job. So I don't know if that's a good example or a bad example, but I do remember it scaring the hell out of me. Another one that really scared me is another one that was a Cinemax premiere, and this was a trauma film. Trauma has never usually been known for doing like scary movies. They have their campy horror films. Shout out to Lloyd Kaufman. Toxic Avenger, which is getting a remake. I don't know if a lot of y'all knew about that. Apparently Peter Dinklage is playing Toxie. I still don't know how I feel about that. I'm just there for Elijah Wood as the villain. Anyway, you had Return to Nukem High, Toxic Avenger. They did a movie. And I'm not sure. I want to say it came out in either 89 or 90. And it's either way, it's a 90s film. It was called Death by Temptation. It was an early Samuel Jackson film. This was one of his first movies. He had a very small part in it. Which is funny because when it's advertised today, he's advertised it has him on the poster, which I feel is deceiving because he's really not in the movie that much and he's not the focus. The focus of the movie is a succubus that resides in a ghetto, and she lures men into her home and she kills them. That's what a succubus is. She fucks them and kills them. This was a scary. Oh my god! I remember seeing this, and this was one of the scariest movies that I had ever seen. Oh my god, this movie was so scary. This day, man, and once again, it's the concept. Once you understand like the concept and the imagery within this film, this, in my opinion, might be the best film that Trauma has ever distributed. The best. Yes, I put it over Toxic Avenger. I put it over Nukem High. I put it over all of them. This is the best quality horror film that Trauma has ever released. And fun fact, Trauma has a film festival, which I did not know, which will be premiering this summer. I actually submitted my short film, The Bathroom, to them. So fingers crossed, hopefully that gets accepted. But yeah, my buddy Matt sent me that. You know, Lloyd Kaufman is having his own Trauma Film Festival. Wow, that's fucking awesome, man. I've been a Lloyd Kaufman fan for years. But oh my god, ever since Toxic Avenger, I had the action figures. I remember the cartoon show. Like it it makes me happy to see a lot of old school artists, old school filmmakers that are still holding their relevance to this day, like John Carpenter, Lloyd Kaufman, uh, Dario Argento. These guys are still killing it today. They can release films and they'll still sell. If Carpenter wanted to release a movie next year, you don't think that's going to put asses in seats? These guys have solidified legacies. Romero, R.I.P. to him. You know what I'm saying? And speaking of Romero, Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 version. This movie changed the game for the zombie genre. It changed the game. Tom Savini, Tony Todd, Patricia Tallman, Tom Tolles, George Romero on screenplay. This film understood the assignment. And the assignment was scare these niggas. Damn it if it didn't. Damn it if it didn't. I watched this movie for the first time. It came on Monster Vision on TNT. Monster Vision with Monster Joe Bob Briggs. If you remember it, shout out to you. Another one that's still holding its relevance to this day. Drive In on Shudder. Go watch that shit. Joe Bob Briggs, you are the fucking man, bro. Because I remember watching the original Night of the Living Dead. And whereas that one was scary, this one was superior. I'm sorry, this one was superior in every way, shape, or the form. It topped the original. It did. It's one of those remakes that's right up there with The Thing, with freaking not Dawn of the Dead. I can't say Dawn of the Dead topped the original. Nah. And I love Zack Snyder, but it did not top the original. It was good, but it didn't top the original. But this one definitely did. Night of the Living Dead definitely topped the original. Oh my God. It's so many ways. And it was cool because a lot of people say it was George Romero's way of correcting some of his wrongs from the original film. One of them was making Barbara a badass. This was one of those early films that depicted like female empowerment, but in a non-woke way. Like when you saw her being a badass as opposed to the original version, you didn't get mad. You didn't get mad. It's like if you were to see it today, you'd probably get pissed because a lot of this whole, feminism woke shit is being thrown in your face. A lot of films have agendas that they just throw in your face. This one didn't have an agenda. The only agenda that this movie had was to scare the hell out of you. And it did. I thought it did. It did a great job. It really did a great job. This was a scary movie, man. Dude, Yeah, 90s zombie movies and 90s werewolf movies. Those were some different animals. 90s creature features, man. They killed it. They really did. I mean, you had and you, even your Return of the Living Dead, which continued into the 90s. I remember watching Return of the Living Dead 3. Still have a hard time watching that to this day. That movie's just so uncomfortable to watch. It really is. The 90s was also your era of your sequels, as it was proven with, Halloween. But Pet Cemetery, got probably, which to this day is the best follow up to the first one, which is Pet Cemetery 2. A lot of people will say the only two movies that matter in the series are the first two. The first one, obviously, is the scariest one, and it's the most disturbing one out of all of them. But Pet Cemetery 2, it understood the assignment of the first one, and it was just as good. And a great soundtrack, too. That was another thing about the 90s. 90s that was the era of the soundtrack. Even if the movie wasn't good, the soundtrack made it good. Spawn is a prime example. Spawn wasn't the best movie compared to the HBO series from Todd McFarlane, but the soundtrack was fire. And a lot of people liked it because of the soundtrack. There was another one. Let's say more 90s horror movies. Oh, how could I forget? How could I forget one of my favorite ones and my favorite vampire movie of all time? The 90s gave us what, in my opinion, is the greatest Dracula movie, greatest Dracula performance since Franklin Jella, and that is Gary Oldman in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Shout out to Francis Ford Coppola for making this banger of a movie. It scared me when I first watched it, and it scares me to this day. To this day, quote Deontay Watt, to this day, it still does. And it's the best Dracula performance of all time. It is the all-time greatest. Nothing against Bela Lugosi, nothing against Christopher Lee, nothing against them, nothing against Max Schreck from Nosferatu. Nothing cuts like the original, but this cut, and it still cuts. From a stellar cast, Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing. Like everything he said, like they gave this man some of the best lines. Between Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins, they have some of the best lines in the entire film. That opening scene is one of the scariest scenes that I've ever seen, because you're seeing the birth of a monster, of probably the greatest monster of all time in Count Dracula, and they tied it with Vlad the Impaler in the best way ever, man. Oh my God, they tied that so well, to the point where you almost believe, like, you know what? Maybe that's how Vlad went out. Maybe history is lying to us. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, maybe it is, man. Who knows? But man, oh my God, I'll watch it. It's one of those I watch every Halloween. I have a Halloween list of movies that I watch. 31 days of Halloween. I pick a different one each day. Dracula is always on my list. Even if, no matter what new ones I watch, that's still on my list. It's right up there with Halloween, Child's Play, Nightmare on Elm Street. I put it right up there with just classic monster movie, man. Just an all-out banger, which still holds up. It holds up to this day, bro. It really does. 90s Craven holds up to this day, man. And that's another, dude. People Under the Stairs, Vampire in Brooklyn. And these weren't movies that were meant to be scary. And that's the thing. A lot of 90s horror movies weren't meant to be as scary as they were, but they were accidentally scary. And that's why 90s era, it really sticks out, because these movies weren't meant to be as fucked up as they were. That's an example of organic. They were organically scary. That's probably the best way that I can describe 90s horror movies. The 70s it was the mindfuck era. The 90s was organically terrifying. People Under the Stairs is a prime example of that. And if you've never lived in the ghetto, then you don't understand. You never lived in one of those neighborhoods that had that one house, just that one house that you were always told, hey, don't go near that house. Most of us have had that. Most of us have had that, dude. I grew up on the north side. We had a few houses that were like that, that your cousins and your aunts told you, like, hey, man, don't go in the house. We don't know who living up there. Don't go over there. When they find the basement scene in that movie where you finally reveal the people living under the stairs and like how they all got there, man, that shit was mind fuckish. That shit was scary as hell. To this day, man, oh my god, that's one of my all-time favorite Craven movies, man. That's another one I watch every Halloween. Every Halloween. Vampire in Brooklyn is another one. And this was a comedy. This was a comedy. I mean, you had Eddie Murphy as a vampire. This shit should, going into it, it's like, man, this ain't gonna be scary. This gonna be funny. Now it was funny, but it was kind of scary too. It was accidentally scary. It wasn't supposed to be that damn scary. Eddie did his thing. That's the thing. Eddie Murphy is one of those where he can be serious and he can be funny, but this proved that he can be scary too with the help of Wes Craven. It was a fun fact. A lot of people don't know this was a Wes Craven movie. I didn't know it was a Wes Craven movie at the time until I really looked up. Excuse me. I looked up the credits for it because as a kid, I never really used to watch film credits that much. And when they advertised it, the trailer, all it said was Eddie Murphy, Vampire in Brooklyn. He beelined Craven in the credits. You had to stay to the end of the movie, and like I wasn't watching no credits. I just wanted to see the film. Like I didn't start watching credits until I got older and started really getting into writing, and like I wanted to see who did this and who wrote that, and I went back and I'm like, oh shit, that was a Wes Craven movie. Wow, how did I not know that? And all the signs were there. Like it had Craven vibe written all over it. Just like People Under the Stairs, it had Craven all over it. I just didn't see it. But those were some scary ass movies, man. Funny, but scary. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which in my opinion, that's the best Nightmare sequel since Dream Warriors. And this was part of a series that, man, it was like I said, slasher sequels for the most part were ass. They were ass, bro. I hate to say it, but they were. A lot of them, like this is coming from a guy that has all the Jason movies. I have every one. I don't have Jason X, so I lied. I don't have Jason X, and I kind of don't want to spend $3 buying that shit. Yeah, I just didn't like that movie, but a lot of slasher sequels were just, they just wasn't doing it. But in the 90s, they started to do it again. They really did. You had Jason Goes to Hell in, I want to say 92 or 93. I think it was 93. Wes Craven's New Nightmare in 95. Halloween Curse of Michael Myers in 96. All three of these movies, in my opinion, were good. Good quality, good scare tactic, good story. They stood out. Even Halloween H2O. H2O stood out. It was nostalgic. You got the return of Laurie Strode, which in my opinion was a better return for Laurie Strode than the 2018 version. That one, I'm sorry, it still holds up to the 2018 version. Some of you may disagree. I can't help it. Because the direction that they went with David Gordon Green's version for Blumhouse's Halloween, no, absolutely not. We all saw how that shit ended. No, it should have ended with H2O. Halloween should have ended with H2O. We shouldn't have got Halloween Resurrection. We shouldn't have gotten the Rob Zombie shitfest. We shouldn't have gotten Blumhouse. They should have just left it be with that. It should have just died in 97. Get your little box collection and just have it at that. Because in my opinion, Halloween started with 78 and it ended in 97. There's no other ones in between. That Rob Zombie shit don't count. It just doesn't, man. It doesn't. Those movies don't hold up. But those three, yes. Jason Goes to Hell, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Halloween Curse of Michael Myers, and Halloween H2O. So that's 4. for slasher sequels. Still hold up to this day, man. Another good 90s movie, 90s horror movie. This was a sci-fi horror film that we went to see in the theaters. A lot of people, some may remember, it's kind of getting a resurgence, I think is the word, because it was really lost in time for a while. It was a movie by Paul Anderson, and everyone knows Paul W.S. Anderson from Resident Evil. I get it. And Mortal Kombat, which was banger. Do not hate on that movie. That's the greatest video game movie ever. But he did a movie called Event Horizon. And to this day, it's probably one of the best sci-fi horror movies that I've ever seen. Keep in mind, I was very young. I was in junior high when we went to see this movie, so I was still relatively young. But I was old enough to start. This is where I started understanding horror films, and I started understanding the stories because, the more I sat with my mom and we watched these movies, she would explain them to me like, okay, this is what this is about. This is why he did this. This is why she's like this. This is why she's possessed. Like, she would explain the shit to me. So I was getting lessons, like history lessons in these movies, and I started taking it in and studying it. And this started my love for the horror genre and wanting to get into writing and wanting to get into horror movies. So this is where that shit started. Event Horizon was an example of that, of how much I had learned off of her. Because we went to see this movie, I understood it. I understood what it could possibly have been about, because this is one of those films that have a lot of theories. There are a lot of theories behind this movie. A fun theory about that is that some say Event Horizon is actually connected to Hellraiser. And that's what happened to the people on the Event Horizon, and why they all went crazy is it's connected to the lament configuration, which I think if you've never looked that up, just go on YouTube and type in Event Horizon Hellraiser theory. It's one of the great, oh my God. Oh man, it's one of the best theories. Like, a few people made videos out of it. I kind of want to make a video out of it myself, but I feel like I would just be stepping on toes that have already did it, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just tell you right now, just look that shit up, because those theories are so fucking awesome. Speaking of 90s Hellraiser, what do we get? We got two bangers. We did. We got Hellraiser 3, which I get why a lot of people would, and this is one that I kind of didn't take as seriously as the others. This one, it was good, but I feel like they tried to turn Pinhead into Freddy, because there's scenes where he was cracking jokes, like the part where he's in the church and he is like, I am the way, and I'm like, oh man, now he's the comedian. And where he's killing everybody in the nightclub and he's cracking jokes and shit. I'm like, oh my God, this, all right, man. This Doug Bradley. If it was anybody else playing that part, I wouldn't have took it seriously in that movie. But Doug Bradley knows how to. He's one of those actors that knows how to just make dumb shit work. Like Robert Englund, they make that shit work. That's why it's hard to see any other actor playing these parts. I can't see any other actor playing Freddy. And I can't see any other actor playing Pinhead. And that's nothing against Jamie Clayton. Jamie Clayton did her thing in the 2022 version. I just don't think that version holds up to the original Hellraiser. I really don't. I mean, I didn't hate it. I just don't think it needed to be 2 hours. That was a 2-hour remake, and it dragged a lot. Like, her parts were some of the only good parts in the movie, but they really didn't show her that much. Damn, that ring was loud. I thought that was my phone. Oh shit, yeah, they get the fucked up part now. Yeah, oh yeah. We about to get into some shit. That reminds me, because we about to tap into some shit. Like I said, we're gonna be jumping in the 90s right now, because we about to get into some shit. Man, so what else? Oh, Hellraiser Bloodline. Hellraiser Bloodline. That was the first Hellraiser movie that I saw in the theaters. Like, a lot of these slashers, there's a reason why a lot of these slashers and movie monsters are so dear, because the 90s gave us that chance to see them in their prime. We still saw these actors in their prime. New Nightmare, Robert Englund was still in his prime. He could have done 3 more Nightmare movies after that. Doug Bradley was still in his prime with Hellraiser 3 and Hellraiser 4. And he did, like, they kept it going. And I think in like the 2000s, he came back because he did, what, 3 more? That's another one. I think I have every Hellraiser one. I'm pretty sure there was 3 more after that. There was Inferno. I want to say there was Deader. No, there were 4. There was Inferno, Deader, Hellseeker, and Hellworld. This was before we got that shitty Revelations remake, which I try to forget about. But every time I turn on Tubi, I think it's right fucking there staring at me. Like, I'm not watching this shit. I remember buying that from Walmart. It was $9, and even then I overpaid because God, that was just hot garbage. Whoo, that was hot garbage, man. That one still hurt. That's one of those sequels that still hurts to this day, man. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Give me a minute. I'm gonna try to process the pain. Yep. Okay. No. Fuck it. I'm gonna try to say that movie never existed. But yeah, a lot of these actors, you got to see them in their prime. Like they were doing their thing. Candyman. Why did I almost beeline Candyman? Why did I really just almost forgot about that? How the fuck? That's another one. And that dude, that and for any of my friends that ever watched this, and you know, and my niece too, like there's we got this thing, it's called the Candyman curse. And it started back in 2021. We had rewatched the first Candyman. And the day after we rewatched it, I woke up and I went in the bathroom and I got stung in the foot by a bee. Cut to my buddy's house. He goes to take the trash out. There's bees swarming his car. Cut to my niece hanging out in her room playing video games. There's 3 bees flying outside of her fucking window. Candyman curse, man. That's why this day is like we have it. We ain't watched it. That movie's cursed, man. I love it. I do. It's frightening to this day. It's still one of the scariest movies ever, and it's mainly because of Tony Todd. Tony Todd is, if you've never met him in real life, you have to meet him in real life to realize that he's not as scary as he is in the movies. But when he does horror, when he's in a horror movie, it's scary. I don't give a fuck if he's the good guy. I don't care if he's the bad guy. He's scary. You gotta meet him in real life. I met him once in real life. It was at one of my buddies. My buddy Travis had a convention in Warren, Ohio called the Dark Xmas. It was in 2007. And this is the first time I met him. And I brought my Candyman DVD and my Night of the Living Dead DVD from the 1990 remake. And I was like, I'm going to have him sign. I'm going to have him sign. And I met him, and I got to say, this is one of the most modest, humble men that I've ever met in my life. Ever. Like, as soon as I walk up to the table, hey, how's it going? I'm telling you. I can't do the voice. Or I try to do the voice. He's just sitting, because he's sitting there and he's just chilling. He's real calm, you know, looking on his phone, and he looks up. Hi, I'm Tony. And he just and I just look and I shake his hand. I'm like, I know who you are. I know who you are. Like, I'm trying to not get starstruck. I feel like Kim Jong-un in the interview when he meets Dave Skylark. Just, oh, don't freak out. Oh, don't say anything stupid. Oh, don't say anything stupid. There's Tony Todd. All right, I'm just, hey, what's going on, bro? Man, I might have had the sweatiest palms, man. I don't know how he didn't point that shit out, man, because I must have wiped my pants 8 times before I shook this motherfucker's hand. But, and I told him straight up to his face, I was like, let me tell you something, man. I loved you in Candyman, but I will say that your greatest acting performance of all time was the 1990s Night of the Living Dead. Which, it wasn't to like kiss his ass, it was the truth. Because in my opinion, his acting doesn't get enough credit in that movie. Like, he blows Dwayne Jones' performance out of the park from the original 68 version. You know, dude, Todd did his thing. And Tony Todd was is a great actor overall. It's just an amazing fucking actor. And I don't understand how he's never won any major awards for his performances. But, yeah, Candyman. The sequels stood out. You know, Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh, Day of the Dead. These movies, they still hold their own to this day. They can still contend with Jordan Peele's remake. And that's nothing against Jordan Peele's remake because I thought he did a fantastic job. And shout out to Nia DaCosta for her directing in that. Like, she did a good job for being new to directing. It's a shame that she had to go from that to the Marvels. Uh, that's the only sad thing about that is that she went from that banger to a shitty Marvel movie that will hopefully be forgotten, but it will probably be remembered for being so bad. Um, but yeah, like she has potential. And a lot of these, and it's not to just kind of just real quick jump on the Marvel thing. A lot of those directors have potential. They just, I don't know. They don't. They just don't have the right. I don't know if you can call it guidance or the right writers. It's just they're missing something, and they're missing something that can help them fulfill their potential to make a good movie. If that makes sense, but I'm digressing. Yeah, the Candyman trilogy. Yeah, those films very much hold up to this day. Yeah, they definitely do. Um, oh yeah, what am I watching? I'm watching Audition. So the reason I'm watching Audition is for another reason that the 90s was so important for horror. The 90s gave us a mass, a rising of Asian horror movies. Asian horror movies started to conquer in the 90s. You had Audition in 99, which nobody really knew who Takashi Miike was until Ichi the Killer in Audition surfaced. And they changed the game. My computer's acting up. Just updated. Oh fuck, we getting snow tomorrow? I hate Ohio. I really do. It was just 60 something degrees a few days ago, and we're getting an inch of snow tomorrow. That's that's great. Okay. Fuck it. Yeah. 90s Asian horror movies. Mainly Japanese. Japanese horror movies were, oh my god, they were a different breed. These movies are a different fucking breed, man. Like I remember the first time I watched Ju-on. I watched Ju-on after I had watched The Grudge. Because I didn't know that they were from the same filmmaker, that Takashi Shimizu did both of these movies. Now, I don't hate The Grudge, but I love Ju-on. I don't hate The Grudge. I don't. But watching Ju-on, it just made me like The Grudge less. Because this, I'm like, dude, this is where it was at. There's something about just nothing, once again, nothing cuts like the original. You know what I mean? Same with Ringu. I love The Ring, but I loved Ringu. I wasn't crazy on the sequel, but I love the original. Asian horror movies, they took, it's almost like they're very good at taking the best elements from Western horror movies and they added just a dab of their own folklore in ghost stories and they can turn it into something that they just make the perfect gumbo of a horror movie. They know how to do that so well. And it's a formula that Americans, we've tried to copy, but we failed every time. Even with The Bathroom. My short film, The Bathroom, is loosely inspired by foreign horror movies, by Japanese horror movies. You know, the supernatural forces that take possession of you and make you do horrendous things to yourself, Like, they're so good with that. And even with that, I felt like, oh shit, maybe I'm just copying these guys. Because I rewatched The Bathroom and then I watched Ju-on and Ju-on 2, and I'm like, man, my shit's really not that good compared to these motherfuckers, man. I get it, they got a studio budget, I understand, but if you look at the budget of Asian filmmakers as opposed to the budget of American filmmakers, our budgets are always higher, but our quality is always less. Well, not always. Most of the time is less. Japanese budgets and Taiwanese, Korean, a lot Asian as a whole. Asian film budgets are usually less, but their quality is high. Why is that? It's because money is not everything. A budget is not everything. You can spend millions and you can spend billions of dollars on a film and think I'm going to have a masterpiece because I put so much money into the effects. I paid the writers billions of dollars, and the movie comes out and it's absolute horseshit. Absolute horseshit. The MCU, prime example. Modern Hollywood as a whole is like a prime example of that. A lot of these movies they put so much money in, and they get in the theaters and people watch them, and it's just meh. So now you're not getting back what you put in, which is the goal as a filmmaker. That is your goal. Whatever money, and my buddy Matt told me this, whatever money you put into your movie, you should get equal amount back, whether it's in DVD sales, merchandise sales, or whatever. Whatever you put into your film, just make sure you get at least close to that amount back. You should at least try to do that. My frame, I hope I'm in. Yeah, I am. Hold on a minute. Yep. I think I am. Okay. Sorry, I was gonna. Okay, now it's crooked. I was gonna put this on selfie mode, but I don't like selfie mode on my phone because it's just for some reason it's blurry. I gotta get my lens clean. I really do. I gotta clean that fucking front lens. But money isn't everything. It doesn't matter how much your budget, how much billions of dollars you put into a film. If your film's not good, it's just not good, man. Sorry, it's just not. You got a majority vote that people did not like your movie, and that's the risk you take as a filmmaker. Even if you like the movie, you like the final cut of it. Oh, cool, man. Hopefully people like it, and you might get nothing. You might get 2 views. You might get thousands of views. That's the risk that I take every time I put out a short film. Or every time, me and Matt, we distribute like a DVD, you might get sales. You might not get sales. Someone's going to watch it, obviously, but that's the risk you take. And I really feel that a lot of modern filmmakers don't understand that, because now unfortunately we're in the era where the fans are being blamed for a movie not doing good. And this is why I miss the 90s up into like in the early 2000s too. And I miss the times before social media, because if a movie tanked, it just got tanked and it got riff tracked. That's all. It bombed, it didn't do good, and it won a fucking Razzie Award, and riff tracks made fun of it. That's the end. That's it. Or Mystery Science Theater came and say, "Hey man, we're gonna make fun of this shitty movie." Boom, okay, and that's how This Island Earth and fucking Coleman Francis got famous. So hey, shit happens, man. That's the risk you take when you put out a project. You can get a banger, or you can get a flop. You know what I mean? But the budget doesn't mean shit. It doesn't. And a lot of Asian filmmakers understand that. They understood that. If you go watch Ju-on, go watch Audition, go watch Marabito by Takashi Shimizu, go watch Incarnation. The quality, the picture quality in these movies compared to Hollywood's picture quality, yes, they're less. But they have a certain ingredient that is just, I can't put my finger on it. They have something that we don't have, and that we've been trying to duplicate, and we've been failing. I can't really make a word for it, but whatever they have, I love it. To this day, a majority of movies that I've watched and loved recently have been foreign films. From Rob Jabaz's The Silence, not The Silence, The Sadness, which is a 2021 Taiwanese film, which is based off of Garth Ennis's Crossed. It's a Taiwanese horror film. Gungeum, Haunted Asylum. There's another one I watched. Train to Busan. These are the dude. A lot of newer films that like I've watched that I've rated like top tier have been low budget foreign films, mainly low budget Asian films. And I feel a lot of this shit started in the 90s. The late 90s, like 98, 99, because I think that's when a lot of these films started to come out. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think Ju-on, when did Ju-on come out? Again, I gotta look this up. I really want to say it came out either 99 or 2000, and 2000 kind of still counts is 90s, because early 2000s you still had that 90s vibe. That's the thing about a lot of beginning of decades. You know, the beginning of the 80s you still had that late 70s vibe. You know, you had your films like The Shining, Evil Dead, that still had the vibe of the 70s, and that's why I love a lot of those films. I love early 80s films more than I love late 80s films. You know, same with early 2000s films. Early 2000s films still had that 90s vibe. Like we were still in the 90s. Not a bad thing, because you still had that good quality before, you know, the new millennium took over. Ju-on, 2000. That's like crazy. Ju-on the Curse, 2000. Still counts as 90s, man. Still does. That's, bruh. Ringu, 1998. Like, bro, these movies, like, that's what I mean. These movies still hold up, man. And that's what I feel a lot of modern scary movies are missing, because we're very, how should I put it? We've seen the best. I'm a millennial. I come from a generation that has seen the best. You know, we grew up off of reruns. There were still reruns. I watched reruns of old TV shows. I was 6 years old still watching Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock was before my fucking time. Schoolhouse Rock, The Electric Company. This is 70s shit. And people are like, why is the 70s your era? Dude, I grew up off of so much old school 70s shit. My favorite band of all time is Earth, Wind, and Fire. I know every one of their songs. So, one of my favorite cartoon shows, Schoolhouse Rock. Oh, like, favorite zombie movie, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were part of that era, that generation that we got the bangers of the 90s. We lived the best of the 90s. But we also got educated on the best of old school, because we had old school parents. You know, we got old school parents. They're going to show you some old shit. Like, oh, you think that's scary? This is some shit I used to watch. This is what I watched when I was your age. And that's how I first watched The Exorcist. That's how I first watched The Hills Have Eyes. That's how I first watched Caligula. If you don't know about Caligula, you don't know what fucked up is. Look up Caligula if you don't know what I'm talking about. Shit, those are, you know, what's the definition of fucked up now? Midsummer? Yeah, Midsummer. Like Midsummer is our Caligula. That's like the Caligula that we could show to our kids when they get older. Caligula, that was the shit, nigga. I saw that and I was like, hey, god damn, man, what the I didn't know if I was watching the snuff, horror, adult movie. I didn't know what I was watching. It was a combination of all of them. But man, God, dog, like this, like I said, we were a part of that generation. Like we got to enjoy the best of old and new. We really did. So when I say that we've seen the best We have seen the best. And we've seen the best. I've seen the best in horror movies. So to impress me, you're going to have to go back to an old school formula. And that's where I feel like a lot of filmmakers are missing that. It's okay to go back to an old school formula. Ty West, Ari Aster, Robert Eggers. These are three prime examples of filmmakers that know how to go back to an old school ingredient, an old school formula, and make it new. Hereditary was a prime example of that. The Witch was a prime example of that. Pearl, X, The House of the Devil, The Innkeepers. These are examples of that. The VHS series, VHS 1, VHS 2. These are examples of going back to an old school formula and making it modern. You can take stuff from the 70s, from the early 80s to the 90s and make it something just perfect. You can use a nostalgia. That's how you use a nostalgia in a good way. That's not just using nostalgia. Hey man, we're gonna bring back this legacy character so we can put asses in seats. Oh, by the way, 30 minutes into the movie, we're gonna kill him off. Hey, y'all like Han Solo, right? Yeah, yeah, he dies like an hour and a half into the movie. Just so you know. I hope that don't make you mad. You know what I mean? Yeah. Y'all remember Lori? Remember Lori from Halloween? Yeah, well, we turned her into Ellen Ripley for no reason at all. Just it looks cool. Hey man, it worked for Sigourney Weaver, right? I mean, granted, what we're doing is not organic, but hey, it'll put asses in seats. Yeah, but nobody's gonna fucking remember it. That's what I mean. Like, I'm talking about two eras that have movies that are remembered, and to this day they still get Blu-ray releases, Steelbook edition Blu-rays. Shout out to Screen Factory for taking a lot of these 90s movies. From 90s Carpenter, In the Mouth of Madness, I think that one just got a new Blu-ray release. Event Horizon just got a new Blu-ray release. That's what I mean. Like, these films, they're solidified. They're part of a legacy, man, that you can't duplicate. You can just remember and appreciate that. You can't duplicate it, but you can appreciate it. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't got to remake everything. Sometimes you just got to appreciate the old. Like, I still go back. These are eras that I go back and watch. I can still watch In the Mouth of Madness and still be terrified. I can still go back and watch Ju-On and still be freaked out. I can still go back and watch Event Horizon, Alien Resurrection. I can still go back and watch these, even Alien 3. I can still go back and watch them and have a good time. That's what I'm talking about. 70s, I can still go back and watch Dawn of the Dead and still get freaked out by the social commentary within that film. I can still go back and watch Opera. Deep Red. Fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I can still go back and watch these movies and have just a feeling of my hair standing up on the back of my fucking neck. That's why these two eras stand out so much. Because they still give you that feeling of fear. And that's the purpose of a horror movie, is to scare you. Is it not? That's the purpose of it. Even if they don't scare you, at least entertain me. Some movies in the 90s and 70s, they didn't scare me as much, but I still loved them. Hills Have Eyes didn't scare me. It disturbed me. But overall, I was entertained, and I could still go back and watch it to this day. Now, the remake is another one of those examples of where it absolutely tops the original. Because that remake to Hills Have Eyes was a banger. That had no business being that goddamn good. Shout out to Alexander Aja. And that's another one. That man has potential. How he went from High Tension to Hills Have Eyes to Crawl. in mirrors. Like every movie I've watched of his, I have loved. He's an exception to the rules of like modern filmmakers that just like he understands. He's right up there with Ty West. They understand the assignment, and that's the purpose. Whatever genre that you do, if you're a comedic filmmaker, if you're a dramatic filmmaker, if your interest is rom-coms or suspense thrillers or murder mysteries, whatever genre you specify, and this goes out to all the filmmakers out there or all the aspiring filmmakers, whatever genre is your specialty, whatever one it is, you have to understand the assignment of the genre that you're pursuing or that you're going to be pushing out to your audience. Understand the assignment, understand what you're trying to do for them. You do horror movies, you scare them. You do comedies, make me laugh. If I watch your comedy and I don't laugh, then I'm probably not going to remember your shit. You do romantic comedies, man. Just you gotta make the girl cry and make her look at her boyfriend like, "Oh, honey, why don't you do things like that with me?" Like you gotta give them that feeling. Whatever feeling is in this movie, we gotta feel that. And I don't feel a lot of modern movies have that. They don't get it because they're so fucking preachy. Everything has an agenda behind it. Where the agenda, the main agenda should be to entertain. It goes back to one of my last videos. It's just entertain me. 70s and 90s horror movies, they not only scared, but they entertained. They left a mark on you. Especially the 90s left a mark on me. If you were like, and maybe this is just me being biased because I grew up during this time. But and a lot of people that grew up in the 70s will probably say the same thing. It left a mark on you. Both of these eras left a mark on me. Now, every film that I mentioned, they all have left some kind of mark, whether it be for an inspiration for me to do something, or rather they just scared the hell out of me to whereas I got to prepare myself before I watch this movie. So this is a face-off, because this is one versus the other. And if I left any movies out, which I know I did, because these are decades, which it's hard to cover every single movie that's come out from these are just movies that I remember specifically. Which one would be better? Now I know I mentioned one before. I think I said 70s, but man, it's tough. It's very tough to say which one is better. I will say they're the two best, in my opinion, as far as standouts go. You know what I'm saying? And it's not leaving out the 80s, especially the late 80s. I feel the late 80s is really where we started to get the 90s vibe. The 90s came early. The 90s came around 88 and 89 because the Night of the Living Dead remake was technically released in 89. It was filmed in 89, but it got that box office thing in 1990. 1990 is like the year that they always say that this movie came out, which 89 and 90 is the same thing. That's like saying 1999 to 2000. But yeah, the late 80s, that's when I feel the 90s started. And it goes hand in hand with the 70s leaking into the 80s, because with the early 80s, you still had the 70s feel. Even with music, I mean, the early 80s shit, motherfuckers were still wearing bell bottoms and they had afros. So go watch The Shining, man. They still dress like it was the 70s. And that movie came out, what, 80, 81? So to say that one is better than the other, that's hard. So this is probably one of the toughest face-offs that I'll probably ever have on here. So if I had to give my own personal vote as to which era was better, I'm gonna have to say 90s. Personally, I'm gonna have to say 90s, mainly because of just the resurgence of this was the dawn of good sequels. It was the era of good sequels. The 80s gave us some shitty sequels. They did. And I think I might cover 80s horror movies in another video, but the 90s was this was the era of the we got great sequels where this was the time where people started to give up on a lot of these films. You almost gave up on Nightmare on Elm Street until New Nightmare came out. Almost gave up on Halloween until Halloween Curse of Michael Myers and H2O came out. You almost gave up on the Pet Cemetery. You almost forgot about Pet Cemetery until Pet Cemetery 2 came out. It gave us the risings of Asian horror. It was the rising of Asian horror movies. You know, Japanese horror filmmakers started doing their thing, and they carried it on into the 2000s. The 2000s, that's why the first couple years of the 2000s was the era of foreign filmmakers, of Asian horror filmmakers, and that started in the 90s. So you got to give the 90s credit for that. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say the 90s, but I'm gonna do this. We wouldn't have 90s horror movies if it weren't for 70s horror. We wouldn't have 90s horror if it weren't for 70s horror films. I'll say that. My vote is still 90s, but you can't have one if you didn't have the other. So let's give a moment of silence or a clap for our OG filmmakers from the late 60s to 70s. I'm talking about your Roman Polanski's, your Dario Argento's, your Lucio Fulci's, your George Romero's, your John Carpenter's, your Wes Craven's, your Toby Hooper's, William Friedkin. If it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't have 90s horror movies. Spielberg, we wouldn't have them. So I thank them, and you should thank them too. So that being said, my vote is 90s horror movies. You might vote differently. Hey, post your comments down below. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Show your brother some love. This has been your boy Eric from AFNB Pictures. And remember, AFNB, always forward, never back. Peace out.